I used to live in that house. Anybody believe me? Well, not that house, but it was a little bit like that house. You see, I used to live next door to a graveyard. I was a pastor of a church, and this particular church had a graveyard right next door to it. And the church provided a home for the pastor and the pastor's family. And that graveyard was in between the church building and the house where I was living. And so in order for me to go back and forth from my house to the church building, then I had to either go the long route around the graveyard or through the graveyard. Now, I don't know if you pay a whole lot of attention to the time when your pastor may be at work, but it is not only first shift, it is frequently second shift, and at times third shift, the graveyard shift, in the middle of the night. And so I found myself regularly having to make a decision about whether I was going to walk through this graveyard. Have you ever been to a graveyard? Have you? Okay. A couple hands, a couple thumbs up. Like, yeah, the graveyard was fun. Woo! I don't know that they're really the most fun place to be. Have you ever been to a graveyard at night? In the dark? A couple of us have. Yeah, a few of us have been to a graveyard at night. If you're not creeped out by that idea, whoo, you are a braver soul than I. Because it can be a little bit weird. In fact, one of the stranger things about this particular graveyard was the day when I realized that there was a headstone there with the name Baney on it. There are not a whole lot of Baneys in the world, but yet there was one who had passed away and had been buried in this graveyard that was right next to my house. We used to tease with our neighbors sometimes and talk about, what if the zombie apocalypse comes, right? This is a horrible place to live, because if zombies are coming back up out of the graves, they're right next door. You want to be far away from the graveyards when the zombie apocalypse comes, just so you know. But this was where I found myself. And occasionally it would be a little bit creepy. Even as an adult, I know, okay, no big deal. And so long as I'm being respectful and so forth, and I'm not really worried about being in trouble or something like this, I'm just on my way to work. I'm on my way to the church building, which is right there. But it was dark. And the crickets make these chirping noises like Mr. Sands. How many of you have heard Mr. Sands make his chirping cricket noise? Yes. And how many of you have heard a cricket around when Mr. Sands was there, but you didn't know it was Mr. Sands? Now you know. Do it now, will you? Ah, can you hear that? Did you guys hear that? Yeah. Yeah. So you can picture yourself in the dark, in a graveyard, being a little bit creeped out. The truth is, all of us get scared sometimes. We get scared by different things. You might be afraid of something that the person next to you think, it's no big deal. But here on this next slide, the truth of the matter is, you get scared, I get scared, we all get scared. And sometimes we really should be, because there are legitimate dangers in our world, right? Stuff that we should be afraid of. But raise your hand if you've ever been afraid of something and then later realized, I didn't actually need to be afraid of that. I was afraid of it, but I didn't need to. Come on, let's be honest. Did you notice I put my hand up? I have been afraid. You can raise your arms. I have been afraid of things that I realized later I did not need to be afraid of. But for whatever reason, in the middle of that particular moment, I was scared. And I could feel that tightness in my chest. I could feel my heart beating a little bit faster. My breathing changed. There's a tenseness in my neck and in my shoulders and in my abdomen, and I'm more alert. And if there's an actual danger, then my readiness to respond to this danger might be a good thing for me to be scared. But if I don't actually need to be scared, it didn't do me a whole lot of good. And in fact, what I find is that there are times where I become afraid. I have fear of the wrong things. And there's a real danger in that. In fact, it's the one thing that I want to teach you about here today. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to say it out loud here with me. The one thing that I want to teach you today is that fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. Think about this. When we are afraid of the wrong things, sometimes it's not really such a big deal, but sometimes when we are afraid of the wrong things, it can lead us to actually push away the very one who can help us to deal with the things that we are feeling afraid of. Hey, I'm here to help. Get out. It doesn't make sense, but it happens. It happens to adults. It happens to students. It happens to your little siblings if you have those, too. It happens to your dog. If you have a dog, dog gets scared of stuff that they don't need to be scared of, right? The squirrel happens to go by in front of our house, and then our dog loses it. She loses her mind. Freaking out. Right? So, here's what I want you to say out loud with me. Fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. You say it. Let's do it again. Let's say it with gusto. Will you come on? Fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. You say it. Fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. That's the one thing I want to teach you today. And so if you forget everything else that I say during this short sermon, I want you to remember this one thing. It's normal to be afraid. It's okay to be afraid. Sometimes we should be afraid. But fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. And that is a huge, huge problem. And because it is such a big problem that all of us face this potential of pushing God away when we're afraid of the wrong things, I'm really glad that God has something to say about it. And so I want you to look at this with me. The text that I'm going to be looking at comes from Luke 8, 26 through 39 here. Luke 8, 26 through 39. Look there with me. It will be on the screen. If you want to follow along in your Bibles, you can. I'll look at my Bible here so I don't have to turn around funny. It says this. They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. So hopping on a boat, going across the water. Picture it with me. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. It's kind of weird, right? A little bit unusual, a little bit creepy. He was met by a demon-possessed man from town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes. That's awkward, okay? But this is the situation. And people were used to it because this wasn't something new. It didn't just happen on a Friday. It says for a long time. This was the case. This man had not worn clothes. Or lived in a house. Or where did he live? It tells us. But he had lived in the tombs. And upon reading this is part of what made me think about, oh yeah, I used to live next to a graveyard. They didn't have tombs, they had graves, but it's similar concept here, right? When he saw Jesus, the Bible tells us, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus?" Freaking out. "Son of the Most High God, I beg you, don't torture me." This is how a demon sees Jesus. "What do you want with me? Don't torture me." Screaming at the top of his lungs. Verse 29 says, "For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him." It had taken control. It had seized him, and though he was chained, hand and foot, and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. So, who's chaining this dude up? Who's chaining this dude up? Remember, he's possessed by an evil spirit, and it says that the evil spirit is leading him to do evil things, and so he's being chained up. By whom? It's other people around. They're freaked out. I mean, the guy is not in dress code, so they're writing him up for a dress code violation, right? Okay. And his behavior is so poor that not only are we talking about a lunch detention, but we're talking about chaining him to the wall. So students, if you're experiencing a lunch detention or something like this, you can be thankful that chaining you to the wall is not a part of the disciplinary procedure of Bowling Green Christian Academy. Yay! Let's hide the chains. But the chains didn't keep him. Somehow he was empowered, I would say supernaturally, by this particular demon to break free of these particular chains. So although they had chained his hands and his feet, he'd break out of those bonds. And then he would be driven to go off away from his friends, away from his family, to solitary places. And one of these solitary places is where he ended up spending most of his time, his home there among the tombs. Are you tracking with me? I think we're at verse 30 now. So, in verse 30, Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" What's your name? And a few of our Bible students have already finished, maybe many of our middle school Bible students have already finished your assigned reading for this particular week. Do you remember his answer? Yeah, what was it to me?
Come out of him?
Oh, yes, Jesus did instruct the evil spirit to come out of the man. But the question is, what was the answer to what was his name? So stick with me, buddy. We'll get to that. Shelby. Yeah, he said legion. Who knows what a legion is? Yeah, we talked about this in class. So if you're in middle school Bible, you remember. A legion is a group of thousands of soldiers. We estimated between 4,000 and 6,000 soldiers. So we're not talking about like literal physical soldiers, but we're talking about a description of a group. So back to the scripture here. Jesus said, What is your name? Legion, he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them into the abyss. Look at verse 32. A large herd of, what's it say? A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and the demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs. And he gave them permission. Verse 33, when the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. So much for bacon. Sorry, I got to cry a little bit about the loss of the bacon. Yeah. Verse 34, when those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off, and what did they do? They reported this in the town and the countryside. You will not believe what happened today. You ever start a story that way? Guess what happened? You didn't see it, but I saw it. I'm going to tell you, this was really weird. Remember that naked guy who's always screaming? We lock him up and he breaks free, and we lock him up and he breaks free, and we lock him up and he breaks free. He's the one who lives over by the tombs. Remember him? Everyone was like, oh yeah, we know him. What about him? Wow. You will not believe what happened. And so they talk about what had happened with the demons, what had happened with the pigs, what had happened with the bacon. I'm sad about the bacon. They reported this in the towns and the countryside. Verse 31, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out. So is he still controlled by evil? No, because the evil had come out. It had left here. And what's he doing? He's sitting at Jesus' feet, and he's dressed. Thank you for putting a belt and a collared shirt on. Yay! It doesn't say that he was wearing those things, but it does say he was dressed. And he was in his right mind. And how did they feel when they saw that the demons had left this man, and now he was dressed and he was behaving in a way that was normal and acceptable and good? How did they feel according to this text? How did they feel? What's it say at the end of verse 35? They felt
afraid.
They felt afraid. When the demon is gone, and then they felt afraid. When the dude's no longer naked, awkward, now he's dressed, they felt afraid. When he's not screaming his head off anymore, but he's sitting here and behaving in a way that is normal and good and acceptable, and they feel afraid. Does it seem to you like they are having fear of the right thing in this moment? It doesn't seem that way to me. I mean, they're experiencing fear, which is normal. They're experiencing fear, which in some circumstances is good and helpful for us to feel afraid. Like if a car is careening towards you out of control, you should feel afraid, and it should prompt you to move so the car doesn't squish you flat like a grape. Grape juice. You should have a certain level of fear of certain things. But this is an instance where they're responding in fear to something that doesn't really make sense to me. So the end of verse 35 says they felt afraid. And then, in verse 36, it goes on. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been what? He had gotten worse? Is that what it says? No, it says how he had been cured. And then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to do something. Pay attention to this. You remember the one thing I want to teach you today is fear of the wrong things can lead us to do what? Do you remember? Have you forgotten it already? I'll tell it to you over and over again because I want to make sure you remember. Fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. So here is an example. Actually, there are like 5 or 6 of them in this paragraph that I'm reading to you. 5 or 6 examples of times where they were afraid of the wrong things. And very clearly it says they were afraid and they are pushing God away. So, come on back here to the text again. Those who had seen it had told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured, verse 37, and then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them. Because, hey, go away, God. Why? It says, because they were overcome with fear. You know, the next part's a little bit weird. The end of verse 37. I'm afraid, I push God away. How does Jesus respond? According to the end of verse 37. It says, so he got in the boat and he left. He left. This is problematic, to say the least. I don't like the idea of God leaving, because I have learned over time that I can trust him. He has proven his trustworthiness to me, and so I like it when he is nearby. But we don't always feel that way. Sometimes we feel like, you gotta go. I'm not comfortable with you being in this situation, in this circumstance, in this part of my life. God, I don't want you to have access to this corner of my heart, to the secret that I keep, to what takes place on a Friday night when my parents aren't around, and I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing, and I don't want God to know about it either, so I want you to go. I want you to go. I don't want you to be here. And so he gets in the boat and he leaves. That's unsettling to me, very unsettling. So in verse 38, then it tells us, the man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with Jesus. Think about how the people in the community had treated him. You remember what they did to him? They chained him up, right? They chained his hands, they chained his feet. So does this seem like a really happy way to get along with your neighbors and your friends and your loved ones? We have a Thanksgiving holiday coming up not too far from now. So imagine if you just like pick somebody in the group when you get together for your great big feast, and you're like, it's your lucky day, we're going to chain you up in the basement. Hooray! That's not a real good way to have a good relationship with others, is it? And so it's not super surprising to me that he's thinking to himself, I don't know that I really want to go back to these people because they kind of treated me poorly. I understand why they treated him that way, all right? The dude was nuts. So I probably would have had a strong reaction to him also. If there's a crazy guy around who is dangerous, then it's normal and in some ways good to feel afraid because he might do something that could be harmful. But he's not exactly looking forward to going back and being with these people who chained him up. So the man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with Jesus. I'm halfway through verse 38. But Jesus sent him away saying, return home and tell how much God has done for you. So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him. There's your paragraph. All right, come on back to the one thing I want to teach you today. That one thing, fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. I want to hear you say it with me here in just a moment. Fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. You say it. Fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. You ever feel like, I don't want you to answer out loud, but think in your mind, you ever feel like you are pushing God away? Have you noticed it? You might have done it on purpose, you might have done it by accident, but it happens. Sometimes we push God away. And sometimes what prompts us to push God away is because we are afraid of the wrong things. And so it's not surprising to me that these people were afraid of him. In verse 29, it talks about how his neighbors, the people there in town, they're afraid of him. And then when we get to verse 34, it talks a little bit about how they are afraid of losing their pigs. You know, I teased a little bit about the bacon. Oh, my bacon, boo! It's funny, right? You know, I like bacon. Yum! But who's more important? Some pigs or this dude? Come on. So we got to ask, what are the pigs in our school? I don't mean like actual oinkers. But what is it that we're afraid of in our school? Are we afraid of being embarrassed? Are we afraid of failure? Are we afraid of having to make a tough decision? Are we afraid of getting into trouble? Are we afraid of illness? Well, that's been going around for months now. Are we afraid of financial concerns in our families or the health of our loved ones? What is it that you're afraid of? What's your pig? You got one. I got one. What's your pig's name? Think about it. They were afraid of losing their pigs. I think they should have really had a different kind of a fear. Not so much about their pigs, but something else. And so here they are in response to having fear of the wrong things, and they're pushing Jesus away. In fact, in a way, they're afraid of having God around. We don't like it when you're here because we don't exactly know what's going to happen. And we can't control it, and it's weird, and it's uncomfortable, and so we want you to go. We want you to go. And then with this guy, out of whom the demons had come, he had some fear too. Fear of his past. Fear of coming back to be in relationship or interacting with these people with whom he had had a really rough time. You ever felt afraid of your past catching up with you? Oh, it might get caught. Wait until my parents find out. Or what if my friends learn about what happened? I don't want them to know, and so I want to keep that a secret, and so I feel afraid, because if they find out what went down, what happened, that is really going to cause problems for me. To be afraid of my past, or to be afraid of other people. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to feel afraid that way anymore. Wouldn't it be great if we did what Jesus talked about right at the end of the paragraph that I read to you, there in verse 39? What's it say? Return home and tell how much God has done for you. It's good to be afraid of the right things, but when we're afraid of the wrong things, it can lead us to push God away. Wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be a great feeling if you and I didn't have to feel afraid of the wrong things, but instead we followed Jesus' instruction and we just let go of those fears and then started letting other people know, guess what really cool things God has done in my life. And he's not done yet. He's going to do even more, and he's going to do it in your life. And God is here, and he is powerful, and he is loving, and he is nearby, and we don't have to be terrorized by him. Let's stop being afraid of the wrong things, and let's stop pushing God away. Fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. Say it again. Fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. You say it. Fear of the wrong things can lead us to push God away. Would you pray with me? Father, I pray that we would be challenged and encouraged and inspired to tell others the good things that you have done for us. I'm glad that you help us to experience fear because it can protect us and lead us away from things that might harm us. But I don't want to be afraid of the wrong things. And I don't think anybody in this room wants to be afraid of the wrong things either. And I certainly don't want to push you away. I love you, and I trust you, and I'm so glad that you are faithful to us, even if we are unfaithful to you. Take our fear and help us to be near to you, because I believe ultimately you are the best and only solution to the things that we are afraid of. In the name of Jesus, amen.